Hello, guys. Yeah, I just got a haircut. Gave myself a haircut. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. It's about life as an introvert. And as if you've really been listening into my videos from my last video, one of my last videos, I state part of how I kind of became an introvert when I was homeschooled. I wasn't always an introvert. And so you could say part of this was a learning process growing up. And to say the least, for a while it really wasn't all that great, but you kind of get used to it. You kind of start to adapt to it. Just because life changes doesn't mean it's the end of the world, to say the least. But there's a lot of negative stereotypes when it comes to introverts. And sometimes when they talk about introverts on the internet and YouTube videos, it most of the time is really negative. They tend to act like there's just this problem with introverts. If anything, lots of times people become introverted because of a problem, not because there's anything wrong with them. And that is definitely one thing I learned as I grew up. And before I even learned the word extrovert and introverted, when I was just a kid, I used to think that people that were kind of more introverted and, quiet, I used to think that they were sometimes just mean or didn't know how to talk to people, or sometimes they might think of an introvert that they might not be talking to you because they think they're better than you or because they hate you, or they're antisocials. And, that's not really true, usually. And the reason why I don't really talk to people sometimes is because there's just simply nothing to say. And one time I told that to somebody, but they kind of took it as a negative thing. It's like, no, I'm not saying it like I hate you, so I have nothing to say. What I mean by that is that there is just simply nothing to discuss. You're doing everything just fine. I'm over here, I'm doing just fine. And there's no reason to really talk or discuss really much. And, that it also might depend on how much you have in common with somebody, versus somebody to have absolutely nothing in common with. You're obviously not going to be talking to somebody you have almost nothing in common with. And I see that even with non-introverts, to say the least. But there are also times when people tend to think that I'm trying to defend myself, and that can maybe sometimes be true. Sometimes at one point I was in kind of a self-defense mode when I was about 17, 18 years old, where I used to, at one point, I just stopped talking because a lot of people tend to say very negative things to me, and part of it being from coming out of a very isolated state to actually seeing the world. I was in kind of a bit of a protective state for maybe a few years at the most, but over time I adjusted to the change of, again, another change in my life, basically. And, I did just fine after that, really. But, people were saying a lot of negative things to me growing up. Even when I was, in my early 20s, people tend to say shit like I didn't deserve what I wanted. They would also say shit like I needed to learn how to talk to people, and that's the reason why I'm quiet. And, there've even been things in my early 20s when people often would say shit like you're no fun, just because they thought I was, quiet or too afraid to do anything, that they would just assume that I wasn't a fun person to be around. Now, it's not like I'm not a fun person to be around. It's just that I don't really like crowds like I used to when I was younger. I mean, I can still be in a crowd of people and do just fine, really. But, it's not really the same as it used to be. I'm not the same person where I would try to grab everybody's attention and be the life of the party back when I was an extrovert. Now that I'm introverted, I don't really care to be the life of the party, and that is what the real issue is when it comes to being in a crowd sometimes. Because if there's all these people, they're dancing, they're chatting with all these people, and being the center of attention, and sometimes you'll see me not really doing much, just kind of maybe have a drink in my hand at the most, and I'm just kind of looking around. And then there's some people that are going to look at me and think, well, what's wrong with this guy? You know what I mean? But this is just from an introvert saying this to an extrovert. If you see something like that, just don't worry. It's okay. It's just they're chill. That just means that they're chill. And if there seriously was a problem with them, or if there's a problem going on, they wouldn't be there in the first place. But most of the time when I'm in places like that, it's because of my father, my stepmother, and some of the other people that will sometimes bring me to places like that. And I'm just fine with it as long as I'm hanging around with them, at least, because otherwise I don't really care to talk to anybody there really much. Besides, even when people do talk to me in highly social places like that, it's typically just small talk most of the time. And sometimes there have occasionally been people that will come up to me and they'll say something. They're like, "Hey," it's like, "Hey," and then nothing would happen. We'll get as far as shaking each other's hands. Be like, "Hey, how's your day? What's your name?" And then maybe soon after that, lots of times nothing will happen, and it's because they lost it. I will sometimes, when they approach me like that, I'll expect them to ask me a question, and sometimes they almost kind of act like they're gonna, but then nothing really happens sometimes, and then that moment just gets awkward sometimes. And I seriously have no problem with them, and I'm sure that they sometimes have no problem with me, but sometimes it just gets really awkward. And you can see that this is kind of part of the reason why I've eventually just kind of stopped going out, to say the least. I mean, even in my mid 20s, I was going out from time to time, trying to socialize a bit. But, I hardly just ever had any fun. And yeah, sometimes these stereotypes I would meet up with these stereotypes over and over again. Sometimes some nights were just fine, and I would meet people that were just fine to talk to for a bit. But then it would never leave anywhere. The relationship would never grow after that, or it wouldn't go much further than small talk. At least most of the time. And there were a couple times I got drunk, and it led to something that I didn't really care for, to say the least. Especially when it goes to bars, of course. But with that being said, I eventually just came to the point where I was just like, you know what, Blake, I'm saying this to myself. I'm just like, you know what? I seriously just do not think that this is for me. Not that there's any problem with it, but I'm seriously just I'm not having fun. Even at nights where it's like I should be having fun, it's like I'm not really having that much fun. And then there's a lot more of these nights where I'm just not having any fun. So, what's the point? Is basically what I said to myself. What's the point? I'm not an extrovert like I used to be. And it's not like I hate human beings. That's not the reason why I'm not going out anymore like I used to. That's definitely not the reason. I don't hate people. Although sometimes it seems like people hate me and put these ridiculous stereotypes on me as an introvert. But Now, the kind of person that might hate a lot of human beings would be somebody that's like maybe antisocial. But, I don't think even people that are antisocial really hate all people. They just might not hate people. They just might hate people that aren't close to them, aren't personally close to them. You know what I mean? Like just people in general. Do I have anything else to say? I mean, and yeah, a lot of people used to come up to me, and they would try to tell me about life, and they just quote. How should I say? They would lecture me a lot. They would lecture me quite a bit, and they would say really negative things to me sometimes in my early 20s to even mid 20s sometimes. But I noticed when I was actually getting in really good shape at one point, and my muscles were growing a lot bigger, that a lot of these negative things that people would say to me just kind of came to a stop. Like, I swear to God, like 80% of the people that used to say negative shit to me had suddenly just stopped saying negative shit to me and lecturing and all that. They even would say shit to me and like, you've never seen stress before and all that. And I remember one time I was 21 and I was having a drink next to my stepbrother Jordan, and I was one of my friends. The guy at the bar, I knew who he was, and he actually gave me a free drink to try. He's like, "Hey, try this. It's called Summer Shandy." I was like, "Oh, I've never heard of this." At the time. Nowadays, Summer Shandy is one of my favorite beers. But anyway. But I just had it in my hand, and I was talking to Jordan, and then suddenly this guy's like, "Hey, fucking eat that drink." I was like, I looked to my right, and there's this guy with his girlfriend. He's like, "Fucking drink it already." At this bar. So I was just like, just drank it like it was a shot. It was like, "Is that better?" And then he just shakes his head and then keeps on talking to his girlfriend. I think the guy was just trying to impress his girlfriend and bossing me around. But you kind of see the point. They sometimes people think that they can also push around introverts just because they're quiet. They think that they're afraid of everything, but that's not really true. That's not true in the slightest. Plus, yeah, I think that guy was a real a-hole, to say the least. But anyway, enough about that. But yeah, when I was about 25, 26 years old, I just kind of, just maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I was just like, you know what, I just really don't care. There seriously isn't anything out here for me. I don't really care for the people much, even if they're all right. We don't really have anything compatible most of the time. Even if we do, we don't really seem to have that much in common, really. Even if I think they're just fine. And yeah, again, I'm not trying to defend myself all the time when I'm quiet. I mean, sometimes I'll be hearing people talk and they're talking about stuff that I can't really relate to. And then I eventually just walk away. Because one thing that a lot of extroverts don't understand about introverts in this way is that they tend to talk about a lot about inside stuff that the people around them aren't really going to care for or really relate to. You see, you really have to talk about things that other people can relate to, or at least possibly can relate to, or know about. I mean, because if you're just talking about things that you and this other guy do and your friends do, they aren't going to be able to relate. I mean, you kind of have to try to work with people, is what I am trying to say. You can't just always expect the other person to work with you. And ask people questions. I mean, seriously, ask them questions and just talk to them. And yeah, don't try to force people to, be friends with you. I mean, just because somebody isn't like your best buddy when upon first or second meeting doesn't mean they don't like you, to say the least. But yeah, I also think that a lot of people, sometimes I think that they're kind of narcissistic. They think that the world kind of revolves around the way that they do things. They think that everybody normal is like them, and everybody not normal is like me. You know, I think you get what I'm trying to say here, to say the least. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much my experience as an introvert. I became an introvert from a lot of isolation and some people bossed me around quite a bit. Not of course not everybody was bossing me around, like my mother wasn't bossing me around, and you know, some my father for the most part wasn't bossing me around. He sometimes did stuff that I still don't agree with to this day, but he did try to be a good father, of course, and then you know after all that, I basically what I'm trying to say is that once you see what the world is capable of doing and you experience it yourself in such a negative way, things just change, you change, you get pushed too far, and things just happen. With that being said, 17 minutes now. I guess I'll let that be the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one, I guess. Bye.